Okay, we are ready to do the second book in our 5-book series of young adult novels this summer. This is Sherman Alexie's book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I've taken some notes of the things I'd like to talk about, so I'm just going to whip through them, and then I would love to hear your responses. One of the things that I thought was interesting about this book, hang on. Okay, first of all, I thought the ending of this book was so good. There was so much awful stuff happening at the end, and I could not figure out how they were possibly going to end it so that it was satisfying and actually made you leave feeling kind of okay about the world, and it did. And I thought Sherman Alexie totally pulled it off. So I read this book actually about 7 years ago, and evidently I forgot all about it because almost everything I read in this whole book was sort of brand new to me. So that was pretty cool. I found that there were so many parallels in this book between this character and Star's character. If you're just coming across this right now, we're doing a 5-book series, and the first book was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. And I found, surprisingly, because I forgot what this book was really about, I found so many parallels between Junior and Star from The Hate You Give. So if you're reading all 5 books, I'd like to hear what you think about that. Just this whole idea of going in between two worlds and having a lot of identity questions and that sort of thing. I think this would also be a really interesting idea to explore with students about, who are you depending on what group you're with, and how a lot of us, myself included, feel like outsiders in certain groups. And, I think a lot more of us feel that way about ourselves than we talk about. I think that would make a good topic for conversation. I found the illustrations in this book really make it a good candidate for reluctant readers, but also for reluctant writers. I think, because the speaker of the book is actually writing, his own illustrations, theoretically anyway, and sketching out so many of his thoughts. I feel like that'll really break open for some kids, what this idea is of reading and literature. Since this is intended for older kids, this isn't really an elementary school book. I think it would come as a surprise to a lot of students to find, the character just drawing a lot of sketches. And I also think for young writers to realize that that's an option for them, that if sketching and drawing and doodling and all of that stuff, if art in general is a piece of who they are, and if it's a way that they communicate their thoughts and their feelings and their ideas, to see it in a book like this and to realize that that's a possibility, I feel like it just opens up more options for them creatively. So I thought that was kind of an exciting thing to think about too. I thought this book was a really interesting portrayal of male friendships. Junior and Rowdy, for one, their friendship was really interesting. Had a lot of just kind of aggression in it, and they could be really mean to each other, and then would have these moments of vulnerability that were really interesting. And then when Junior found Gordy at his new school, and they were able to form a friendship too, but it had some similarities, I thought, because they would start to feel kind of close, but then they would kind of just insult each other. And I just thought that was a very interesting kind of balance. And I say male friendships because I think, some of our male readers might see their own friendships in there. But I also think that for girls, for all of our students, I think it raises interesting questions about friendship. And what is your friendship like? How vulnerable are you with your friends, or how often do you sort of tease each other and make fun of each other and say things that sort of seem mean? And I think it also raises the question of, how much do you put up with from your friends? What makes you stay, and what makes you choose the people who you call friends, and what makes you ultimately decide to go? I feel like the author, through the voice of Junior, did a lot of really interesting observations of these two different cultures, really his home world, his home culture, and what life was like on the reservation, and then this other world that he spent with this white community. And I thought it was good that as a character he had positive and negative things to say about both communities. And I think it would make an interesting conversation with students to ask them, which of these two worlds is the most similar to the one you live in? And, what are your thoughts about these two different communities? Where would you place yourself? And how is the life that you live similar or different from, either of these two worlds? And I really, depending on what communities you're teaching the book in, or you're letting the students discuss the book in, they could be coming at it from a lot of different perspectives. But, I thought it was great that Sherman Alexie chose not to make, the white world this crystal clean, perfect, everything's better over there. He definitely pointed out the negatives with it, a lot of parents being kind of absent, or just uninvolved, the dads being uninvolved. But then again, noticing how many opportunities these kids had handed to them compared to his own life on the reservation. But then also pointing out in his own community, like we stay together, we don't split up all the time, and we we know each other, and people aren't just like off in their own spaces all the time, and just pointing out the laughter and the just a sense of community that he got. I really liked that balance that he gave it. I also think it's interesting that the question of, if you work in a predominantly white, middle upper class community and are going to be bringing this book and introducing it to your students, I think it's important to think about how to discuss this book without it being a sort of like us and them. Like, look at this almost like an anthropologist, like, look at this interesting culture. What can we learn about this other culture? And how do you do that? Like, how do you talk about a book with a group of students that maybe are not very diverse, and do it in a way that's got a lot of interest in this other culture without treating it like it's the other? And I don't have any answers for that, but I think it might be an interesting thing for us to talk about. So, and then just one other question that I think would be interesting to ask students is how they feel about Junior's decision to go to Reardon. Because that's sort of the basis of the whole book, this decision to do this, the decision to move forward with it and stay, and then everybody's reaction to it. And so it would be also interesting to find out from students, what do you think about this? Do you think this is a good idea for him? Do you think he's leaving his own community behind? And how do you feel about the reaction that he got from his home community, especially during that one basketball game when he came home to play his old team, and the pretty violent reaction that he got from them? How do your students see all that? Do they understand both sides? Do they, feel offended by the reaction of the home community? Do they feel it was totally justified? I just feel like there's so much rich stuff in here for conversation with students. So I'm going to look around for related media. There's a movie that I saw, and I think it might be called Smoke Signals, but I'm going to look for that, and I'm going to add links to that below. If you're watching this on YouTube, then I will also provide a link in the description about where you can find the rest of the discussion about this. So tell me what you think about this book and our next book after this. And I didn't bring it with me, but it's called Persepolis. That's the next one we're going to be doing. Okay, I want to hear what you think next.